Hello, this is Rosario Burgos Santoyo and my partner
Gretel Smith.
from the Sweet Divorce podcast. And today we have our guest, Cassandra Lelik, who is a senior litigation attorney here at our firm. Hi, Cassie.
Hi, guys.
Today we're going to talk about child custody and visitation issues, but specific child custody and visitation issues. And I will be posing some questions to Attorney Lelik about some considerations when you're dealing with custody issue that deals with two different states. So, Cassandra, would you like me to call you Cassandra? Attorney
That's
Lee. Okay. Cassandra, are there ever any cases where a child has parents that are in two different states? And if so, is there anything specific that you look to in order to determine how you can best represent these particular clients?
Yeah, and this is a huge deal across all of the states because we're such a fluid country where we move between states a lot. This is a big deal in each state, and especially in San Diego. This is one of my I get really excited about this topic, and I don't know why, but because we're so heavy with military, we have a lot of military that come from every state in the Union, even Puerto Rico and things. And so when they're coming, they're stationed in California and San Diego. They're usually coming from another state. It's very rare that we have a San Diego native stationed in San Diego. So they bring their families because they're stationed here. And so what controls in custody in these situations, what's called the Uniform Child Custody Visitation Jurisdiction Enforcement Act, the UCCJEA. And each state has codified that in their own way, but that is the overarching idea that in these cases, we needed to have something uniform in order to make sure that every state knows how to handle this. I have had a lot of cases, I'm sure both of you have, is that we have our military members here with their families and they're having issues with their wife. And their wife says, we're having issues. I want to move home for a little while with the children so that we can get some space and we can have some time apart. Well, what ends up happening in almost all of our cases, and you guys can chime in if you have some different cases, is that they'll go home to their home of record state, which is not California, and let's say that it's Georgia, and they'll stay in Georgia, and then they'll enroll the children in school in Georgia, and then they'll say, well, we're living with my mom and dad, and now they're in school, so we'll just wait. Well, the problem that we have is that our service members a lot of times want to give that time and they want to get their families back together, not knowing that what their spouse is actually doing is establishing jurisdiction in another state. So once that party has been there for 6 months or longer, that new state now has jurisdiction over the children, which means even if California wanted to say, well, you were here first, they've been there long enough where the new state gets to say, well, our rules and our laws now apply to this child or children in this situation. And so then the service member that has to be stationed in California through no fault of their own has to now litigate in another state because not only has that person been there for 6 months, the children have been there for 6 months. And then most of the time now you're looking at visitation on holidays and summers rather than a weekly or biweekly or even monthly visitation with your children. So you're in a place where you have to go by the rules of this other state. And there's a lot of states that have codified visitation for the other parent, which means in California, we look at each case separately. We say, hey, this is the children. These are the parents. These are their jobs. This is their situation. We look at each family unit on its own. Other states have codified in their rules that say, listen, this is the primary parent. The other parent only gets every other weekend and Wednesday night. And there's no way around it. So you really are then having custody taken from you because you're really trying to work out your marriage, but that's not really what they're doing. And so for a state to have jurisdiction, that child has to have, if they're under 6 months old, have been born in that state, there's been sexual relations in that state, and you have to have 6 months in that state in order for the court to have jurisdiction. The problem is sometimes that gets fuzzy. Like we have to use outside indicators of were they born here? Where were they conceived? And so we have all of these other extraneous issues, especially in the military, where a lot of our guys don't change their licenses from their state of record because they're still filing taxes in that state of record. There's the issue of where you intend to reside once you're done. And so we have a lot of conflict with trying to figure out and trying to make sure our at least our military is understanding that these are not issues and they have to be careful, because if you're waiting till 5th month to file in California, yes, California has jurisdiction and California will assert it. But now the issue is what has been happening in your family is these people are gone. Your kids have been living in this life. The court doesn't really want to mess with a lot of that when that's what you've been doing. And so I want everybody to be careful about making sure that you're not letting people just leave for unknown periods of time. You know, a 1 week vacation. How many times have we seen a 1 week vacation turn into a 6 month stay?
Yes.
Or we're just going to go for a little bit to visit my parents.
Right.
1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you know, and then you blink your eye and they've established jurisdiction, and now you're not seeing your children, or your kids can't live with you, and then they want support, and then your BAA comes into play, and then you don't have a high percentage. And so I just want everybody to be very cautious and careful when somebody has lived with you, or your children have been with you, and then somebody's taking them out of the state, and making sure that you're acting right away, because it's so much easier for us to get children back after a week or two than 5 and 6 months. And then, you know, or they're enrolled in school and they've been in school, you know.
Right.
So we just want to make sure that everybody's paying attention, because as much as I want to say everybody has really great intentions, a lot of times they don't, and sometimes their intentions change after they've been away. And so we really just want to make sure everybody's very on top of understanding that you have limited time and you can't just wait, because the court is then going to ask you, well, what took you so long? Why are you here 5 months later? Even 5 and 6 months, of course, like that's a long time to not see your kids.
Right.
Why you have essentially just let this move happen without, you know, a legal basis. So it's just important for us to know that this exists. And we're talking about filing and serving too. There's issues with service. We need to have them personally served, because then there's some states have issues of, if it was filed and not served, do they have jurisdiction? Is it filed and served personally? It gets to be really complicated, and we want to make sure everybody's, you know, looking out for their interest and their time with their children, because every other holiday in summers is not really a lot of time.
It's not the best that they can do. No. And it's also something that's avoidable. I think that's what's really important for us to make sure that some people are stationed elsewhere and they're not able to move their child or children with them. So that's a different situation. But if you have an established custody pattern where you're very involved with your child and all of a sudden the other parent moves away and it's a sudden stop of that continuity, that's something that can be avoided. What is something, say I'm a service member and my spouse is saying, oh, I'm going to go visit my family for a week, and you've already been rocky. So what's something that can be done to prevent that person, or me for this scenario, from being in that situation where all of a sudden I'm having a hard time getting my child back to California where I currently am? Do you have any specific advice that can be done that would put the service member in a better position? Or this particular topic, I'm sure, affects service members more than the general population. However, it does apply to anyone that has a spouse that may be connected to a different state other than where he or she is living. So I said service member, but you know, the other parent, if I'm the parent in California and the mother, father of my children is moving to another state, then what can I do to make sure that that child is returned to me?
So there's a couple of things you need to do. So there's a difference also between knowing they're going to leave and then the game that they play if we're just going on a visit. So to keep them from leaving the state at all, you have to file and serve them, because there's restraining orders on the documents that say you may not take them out of the state of California. So if you're concerned at all that you don't want them to leave the state at all, that's a way to keep them from leaving at all. That is the easiest way to get them back also, because now they're in violation of the restraining orders. Now, if you are a little rocky and you're in a relationship and you're like, okay, well, they are going on a vacation. This is something they do a lot. They go visit their family, and they say, we're going to be, you want to date, they're leaving and you need a date that they're coming home. If you get that and they don't come home on that date, you need to act right away. You need to file your motions. You need to file your thing, and you need to get them personally served. And you can even go in ex parte to ask that the court have them brought back, because they've been taken out of the state without your agreement. So there's things you can do along the way, depending on your situation, because not everybody wants to jump into just filing and service.
Right.
If they're just a little rocky and they're like, oh, well, maybe they just need a break. But after the week or the time that they said that they were going to be gone, I mean, and if they're trying to take the children for longer than a week, maybe even 2 weeks. I say 2 weeks is pretty long. Then you need to start making sure you have dates of return so that you can be on top of it. And the minute they don't come back for on the day that they decided or the day that you agreed, that's when you need to start your actions, because that's when the court is going to expect you to be doing something. A lot of people are like, well, I didn't know, and then they just didn't do anything. And then judges really do hold our clients responsible and for their actions or non-actions. And so we need to make sure we're on top of it. And even 2 weeks away from your children is hard. So keeping them away, and then you're farther and farther away of being primary parent to them, a parent that's around doing things. So there's things you can do along the way, and we can only do so much as attorneys ourselves. So if you come to us and your children have been gone for a long time, we can try to help, but there's only so much we can do when the longer you wait. We need you to come to us right away, even just a consult. If you have even a question, call, get a consult. Well, we can talk it through and let you know what days and what times is going to be important for your case specifically. What problems are you having? What is your situation? Because a lot of times we can even as attorneys decide and like, hey, I think that they're probably, it's probably not a big deal. They're not taking anything with them. They're not taking the children's important documents. A lot of it is, what are they taking with them? How long are they staying? What time are they leaving? When are we doing these? Are we going to visit vacation during the school year? That doesn't make sense to be leaving for weeks at a time. The kids are enrolled in school. So a lot of it is being able to give you an idea of what that looks like from our experience. We've seen many of these on both ends, both women, men, service members, regular people go through this, and we can usually point out somebody that's leaving for a reason, and also give you a plan to be on top of it and get your children back in a way that makes sense, so you're not stuck with weekends or holidays and summers.
I wanted to kind of bring out a point on the, not waiting. So have you had experience where a person may have waited, but they filed before that 6 months was up? And then maybe California says, you know what, I'm going to give jurisdiction up to the state that the children are in.
I haven't had that yet because we have been able to luckily get California to continue to retain jurisdiction, but it happens a lot where under the UCCJEA, just because California has jurisdiction or another state has jurisdiction, they can give that up.
Right.
The judges actually from the two different states a lot of times do a UCCJEA conference, which is where the judges talk and they have a hearing regarding who has jurisdiction. And even if we have jurisdiction, a judge can say, listen, they've been there long enough. These are their ties to that community. I'm going to let this state have it because you waited too long. I mean, there's a difference between a judge giving it up after 2 weeks to a month and after 5 months and 3 weeks. And so I'm luckily, I should say, haven't had that issue, but I know plenty of people that have been, have had to go through that.
I think you bring up a good point that it's important for us to enforce our rights.
Right.
And there's kind of a policy really with the law that we don't encourage people to just sit on their rights. And that this affects many different laws, such as, maintaining your property, even your real property. If there's somebody who's sitting down somewhere for a certain amount of time, then that property can become his or hers. So the same is true of, well, our children, which should be the most important thing that we would want to enforce our rights about. And so as soon as there's something where I have a right to see my child and that's being taken away from me, it's so important to act because it also serves as proof that you desire to see your child. That this is not something that you've encouraged. This isn't something where you got tired and you're just saying, go ahead, take them for a bit. And then when I'm ready, I'll take them back. This is something where you want to be part of that child's life. You want to participate. You want to continue with that daily routine. So it's important not to sit on your rights. Generally speaking, when you have a child, you have a right to that child. You have a right to see that child. You have a right to make decisions regarding that child's education, health, welfare. So it's important to remain consistent and to remain part of your kids' lives. Another point that you brought up was that to get dates set. So I think that the importance of that is also sort of building up proof of the agreement that you reach regarding this particular vacation time or visitation time. And it's also important to get that in writing because words are difficult to prove. If you have a conversation, you can't really prove that that conversation took place. So it's important to say, okay, you said that you were going to return them at this time. Send a text, send an email confirming, even if it is a verbal conversation, because you're really building up a case for yourself, just in case. You can't go back in time and say, oh, but we had this conversation back in June, remember? Because you'll be surprised at how quickly people's memories slip. So as soon as you have a date set, it's important to get that in writing. If it's a verbal conversation, like I said, follow it up with an email or a text to make sure that those dates are confirmed, as well as the intent. Because if you have a return date from the other party, then you also are able to prove that there was never an intent to make this a permanent move. So those are some great points. Thank you for bringing them up, Cassandra. Do you have any other words of wisdom about visitation time? Because oftentimes if that child is away, it's hard to wait for them to be returned to you. Would you recommend maybe flying to the other state to make sure that those ties remain strong? Or what do you have in terms of advice for a parent who's away from their child and is having to really fight to bring them back?
And a lot of that is going to be specific to what's going on in your particular situation. There's ways for us to get visitation time in between. It's again, not waiting to act. Every flight you take to go see your children that's denied to you is helpful for us to bring to the court, because part of a move away and part of a best interest standard is which parent is going to be the one that facilitates a relationship with which parent is going to be the one that says, hey, this kid needs both of us. And how am I going to make sure that our children get both of us? And so every time you try and you're denied, or even if you're not denied, you at least can show that you are putting in the effort. And I think you hit that perfectly. What effort are you putting in? The courts want to see that you're not just looking at these children as pieces of property. These are human beings that need both of you and have healthy relationships. So flying out, showing all of the things, how many times you tried to call, all the times you tried to communicate, every time that they've kept them from you, especially the earlier the better. The dates you have, San Diego, a lot of our courts are really backed up. So the longer you wait to get in, the longer it's going to take for you to get your children back or to get any time with your children. Because if you're married, the problem we run into is you are both entitled to custody of your children. So they can take them out of state without a court order, but you can go and see them and bring them back. But then we cause issues then we're fighting over the children in front of the children. And we don't want to do that, because then it shows that you're not the parent looking out for the best interest. However, we have to be on top of it to know, hey, you're entitled to see them. We need to get into court and get a court order. We need to get a judge on top of this. The longer you wait, the longer out. I mean, we are setting trials till into 2025 at this point to get anything done. But we can get you in to get temporary orders or to get them returned until that time. And that's going to be big, because we don't want to wait a year to have them back in the state, because then that's going to cause a bunch of issues with your trial and your requests.
And there's a difference, right? So when we're talking about the military service members moving, a lot of times these are people who don't have a case filed yet, correct?
Correct.
And then when we're talking about parents moving away, they may have actually had a file, they might have custody orders. And so it's important also to differentiate, I think, when we're talking about this situation of whether or not you have a custody order that's currently in place versus this is a new case. And if it's a new case, I think it's absolutely important and imperative to immediately act. If you have a custody order, you can actually go into court ex parte and get an order to have those kids brought back to you. And you definitely want to act regardless, but you have different ways to go about it. So,
and the other thing to think about too is if you have an order, so if you have an order in California already, California has jurisdiction.
Right.
Now, once people are letting people leave, then you start to get, California might have jurisdiction, but that's going to be a place where California is going to more easily give up jurisdiction if they've been living somewhere else.
Right.
So a move away process after you already have orders is a huge, huge process that we go through, and is really, right now I'm setting 3-day trials for, because, there's factors that go into that. So you're right. There's a complete huge difference between if you already have orders, it's less of an issue because they're not allowed to move without your permission. I mean, you still want to file and bring them back, but then it's the other party that wants to move. It's on the onus is on them to file and request that move. Whereas there's nothing filed, it's on you because they have taken the children and they have rights to do that. So there is a difference about whose fault or whose onus it is to get on it. And that's a really great differentiation.
Yes. So we'll have to do another podcast about the factors that are specific to move away. I think that would be a really good one and very informative. So,
absolutely. Well,
with that, do you have any closing words for us, Cassandra?
It's never a bad thing to figure out what your rights are. I mean, any consult with an attorney is gonna save you heartache, headache, and money. Even if you look at it and you say, "Listen, I mean, I don't think we need to do anything," or she comes back and there's no problems and you'll live happily ever after. That's great, but knowing your rights and knowing what you need to do is so important. Don't Google it. Don't go on Facebook groups. Like I said, my husband's a Marine. I've been in these groups where everybody's giving legal advice that aren't lawyers to other people, and it's atrocious and it's awful. So don't ask Google, don't ask the other wives in your military group, don't ask people that are going through the same thing, because they're not. Every situation is so individualized. Make sure you're making the call. It's really cheap. It's not that expensive. Most of us, our rate, we give you an hour for $125. That is not even our regular rates. So go get the consult, figure out what your rights are, and make sure that you are protecting them. Like Rosario said, make sure you're protecting yourself.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much, Cassandra. Thank you for joining us today. And if you find yourself in need of legal advice, please call our office of 833-931-1615. We'll be happy to talk to you and set you up with an initial consultation. Until next time, have a wonderful day.